Fire and water, enemies to lovers, heroes and villains. It's so easy to see why Zuko and Katara might belong together. So much so that even some of the original voice action cast of Avatar: The Last Airbender seemed to want it to be so, including Dante Bosco, the voice actor for Zuko, who wrote a freaking poem about Zutara, where he said, and I quote, "Sometimes the memory of what could have been is so much stronger than what actually happened, because the memory of perfection lasts longer. And even if we didn't end up together, it will never change that you changed my life forever." Cringe! There's also been some particularly spicy rumors when it comes to the live-action Atla being aged up, and that combined with some speculation has made for some pretty interesting stuff. Kyo and Tio and Gordon Cormier, who are the voice actors for Katara and Aang, don't really look like they could be a couple because they just look like they're so different in age. But Dallas Liu, the voice actor for Zuko, and Kyo and Tio, they definitely could look like a couple. That combined with how the original creators of Avatar are departing, and the general knowledge that things will be a little more mature, has led to some pretty interesting speculation, where some people even think that Zutara might be canon in live action Avatar: The Last Airbender. And of course, I am like any other attention whore YouTuber, so of course I gotta drop my 2 cents on the matter. What do I think of Zutara? So, before we begin, I just want to say I'm not really a shipper. Avatar to me is not about romance, it's about a hero's journey that covers the intricacies of war and politics in an incredibly fleshed out world. I wouldn't have missed it one bit if Aang and Katara never had romantic development or anyone else, except for Sokka. Sokka needs to be portrayed as a tail magnet he is, and no other interpretation is valid. But although I don't feel strongly about romance in Avatar aside from Sokka, I'm an absolute sucker for interesting character dynamics. Not just in romance, but especially with characters who have history and depth, the way that Katara and Zuko do. So let's talk about Zutara. Romantic potential, intricacies of the pairing, and I also wanted to give a tribute to just how excellently these stories are woven together, because without getting into their romantic potential, they're very important to each other's characters. I love Katara, I love Zuko, I love Avatar. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk about Zutara. When should a relationship exist in fiction? I think it should be when it adds to character. Suki and Sokka work in season 1 because Suki is the vehicle through which Sokka breaks out of his sexism, and Sokka and Yue's storyline works because of the way Sokka grows following the events of season 1. So if we want Zutara to work, I think there needs to be good reason for something to happen from the narrative perspective in a way that benefits their characters. And thankfully for Zutara shippers, there's a lot pulling Zutara together. The most important similarity, and the most apparent similarity between Zuko and Katara, is their families. Specifically, both Zuko and Katara lost their mothers at an incredibly young age, and they specifically lost their moms to save them. Ursa was banished because she didn't want Ozai to kill Zuko, and Kaya pretended to be the last southern waterbender to save Katara. These two moms were on some Lily Potter save the child type beat, and Zuko and Katara were affected immensely. Especially more than Sokka and Azula were, because those two took more after their fathers anyway. After her mother's death, Katara took on an emotional, maternal role and started caring immensely for people's emotional burdens, as seen innumerable times throughout the show when she's there for Aang, Sokka, even Toph. And Zuko's development radically changed with the departure of his mother as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that Zuko and Katara's similar backgrounds result in somewhat similar growth. And this is where I like the idea of Zutara the best. I like it when characters change and turn into new things. It's one of the reasons that Aang to me is one of the least compelling characters. I don't feel he's challenged enough throughout the entire show. But Zuko and Katara are challenged in really similar ways, and that's due in large part due to some pretty strong parallels. Zuko starts the series as a classist royal. He's pretty self-centered and is single-mindedly focused on his honor. His journey is about looking externally at the Fire Nation and at his own place, and Zutara could be huge for him in this regard. Zuko seeing Katara romantically could be a significant departure from him being Crown Prince, and actually seeing her for who she is as a person, a victim of the Fire Nation. This happens to Zuko a lot already, when he meets various people in the Earth Kingdom. But Katara is the logical conclusion to Song and Lee and Jin, and his learning about the world. It would be the final, most important realization, because it's someone who Zuko has actually directly impacted. Zuko acknowledging the pain he caused Katara and confronting his own heritage and Fire Nation status is an incredible dive into his character, and there's no better person for him to conceptualize in this way than Katara, a Water Tribe peasant who was so directly impacted by the Fire Nation, not just by him, but in a similar way that he was through their respective mothers. And I think the dynamic is really compelling on Katara's side too. Katara's arc is about understanding the world through nuance. Her primary stories where she shines individually are The Painted Lady Jet, and Hama, and they're all about her understanding the reason for her suffering. She reminds me kind of like Sasuke, where she's searching for an answer to her problems and her rage, and the Southern Raiders is the culmination of that journey. What will she find when she confronts the man who killed her mother? Will Zuko help her get closure? So this episode, the Southern Raiders, where Zuko and Katara go to confront her mother's killer, is the keystone moment for Zutara and for Katara's character. And so, of course, it's the one I want to talk about in the most depth. Before we really get into it, I just want to remark that part of this episode is really funny. Zuko realizing that Katara could have ended him with bloodbending is amazing, and his reaction to her incredible power is just great. Them setting out on this quest is really cool and entertaining, and I think it makes some incredibly rife character conflicts between Zuko and Katara and Aang. But although I think it's a great episode, I'm not sure if it's a healthy dynamic. And here's the problem with Zutara for me. Let me be clear, I don't think that Aang is perfectly healthy for Katara either. And honestly, I don't have a problem with this. I like that neither of the potential romantic options in Katara's life at this point can really provide her an answer for her suffering, and that she needs to figure out that meaning for herself. Because although Zuko does give her a way to express her frustration, it's equally as self-serving for Zuko. He wants her to trust him. He doesn't encourage restraint or thoughtfulness. It's not exactly his place, but he also doesn't need to be totally dismissive of this dark side of Katara's character. Katara's journey is about nuance and understanding. It's about using her experiences to understand the world. And in some ways, Zuko also does this. But to me, he's too close, and that's exemplified in this episode. He knows what it's like to lash out, but he also lets Katara lapse into problematic tendencies. He encourages her anger, her rage, sides of her that she doesn't really necessarily like about herself. This isn't necessarily to say that Aang is much better. I actually say that Aang has the opposite problem of seeing the world in a more black and white way as a child does, and neglecting the nuance of Katara's character and her rightful anger. But I think Zuko is too far in the other direction, and I don't think he encourages growth into Katara's character arc. Speaking of Aang, let's talk about Zuko and Katara's real significant others, Mai and Aang. I already covered Katang in a separate video, so check that out if you haven't already. TLDR, I'm not really anti-Katang, but I do think it was handled pretty badly in the last few episodes of the season. I do want to cover Mai eventually, but I love Mai and Ty Lee, and they're getting their own videos, so keep a lookout for that. For now, I will just say that even if Mai and Zuko are a good thing together, that doesn't necessarily mean that Zuko and Katara are not. I think multiple ships can very rarely be good for a show if there's no explicit romantic subtext. You can learn from multiple people. Katara can grow from both Aang and Zuko can learn from both Mai and Katara. But okay, I can hear some of y'all shouting the million-dollar question at me. Are they in love? Do Zuko and Katara have the hots for each other? What's the romantic answer? It's no. I think the strongest thing people say in favor of Zutara is Zuko's jumping in front of Azula's lightning in the finale. Some people say this signifies his self-sacrifice for Katara and his love for her, but I really disagree. I think that Katara and Azula's duel is about Katara and Azula more than it is about any potential Zutara stuff. The two of them are explicitly parallels. They're both incredibly badass fighters, incredibly strong benders, and incredibly important to the story. They're both siblings, and I think their stories are intertwined in a similar way that Zuko and Katara's are. And also, I really hate the idea that Zuko jumping in front of Katara necessarily means romance. I'm generally anti the idea that anything done between men and women necessitates romantic subtext, so it really disappoints me when people think that Zuko's jumping in front of Katara means that he's in love with her or something. Zuko would have jumped in front of anyone here. You think he wouldn't have jumped in front of Aang, or Toph, or hell, Mai? This isn't unique to Katara. I don't know if I'd call it growth, but this moment is Zuko ultimately fulfilling an act of selflessness. He doesn't need to do this. If Azula blasts Katara, Zuko can still win the Agni Kai. The war can still end, he can still become Fire Lord. But Zuko's journey is about righting wrongs, and Katara's presence here allows him to do just that. He's gonna beat Azula because Azula is unhinged, but he's gonna save Katara because he's a hero. So ultimately, I think that the arcs for Zuko and Katara are necessarily intertwined. They do color and inform each other's characters. Katara gives Zuko perspective and makes him think more critically about the Fire Nation, and Zuko gives Katara an object of interrogation through which she can examine imperialism and the world and her own feelings on suffering and experience. But in terms of romance and anything actually healthy developing, I think I actually agree with the creators Mike and Brian. Zutara is volatile, emotional, not calming, and most of all, they're kids. Avatar doesn't need romance. It's about personal growth. And although Zuko and Katara were integral on each other's journeys, a romantic relationship between the two would not have been good. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and hitting the bell. Only 4% of my viewers are subscribed, and I put a lot of time and effort into my videos, so it would really mean a lot to me if you subbed. Let me know what you want me to cover next, and yeah, until next time.